welcome, dear friends, to New Heart, New World. I'm Rasika Manjari, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about compassion for the bird. Now you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. Compassion, what is it really? What is the quality of compassion? Is it something that is only accessible to the likes of Mother Teresa or other similar personalities? What is compassion really? Well, we learn from most spiritual traditions around the world that compassion is actually an expression of love. So we sort of know that compassion is a good quality to have, and being compassionate is a good thing to be, and it's the right thing to do in the right sort of situations. And we may even have examples of that in our lives. So if we've ever experienced compassion from another person or someone being compassionate to us, it is such a sweet thing. It's the milk of human kindness flowing towards us, and it can often come as a shock to us because we often don't expect that in our crazy world. If we've ever been touched by compassion ourselves in this way, then we may also be inspired to be compassionate ourselves. Such is the power of the quality of compassion. So compassion, however, can be useful or not so useful, because there can be a sort of sentimental compassion that can often cause more harm than good in the long run. For example, if a beggar on the street is asking for money and we feel compelled out of a feeling of what we feel is compassion towards them, and we give them great amounts of money, however, not knowing that it is actually funding a drug habit or something similarly detrimental. So we can see that compassion can be misplaced if not directed to the right person in the right way. So to avoid this kind of thing, we just need to really understand what true compassion is really. And we'll get to that in a minute. So being compassionate can sound easier than it is at times, because we're always faced with choices of how to respond in certain situations, and when our buttons are pressed, then it can be tempting to just press buttons back and to be very reactive in situations without giving much thought to how we're responding or how it's going to be received. So it can be like an automatic response, and can come from a sort of conditioning or type of response that we're used to from ourselves, and sometimes it can be very or seem out of our control in the way that we respond. But is this sort of automatic, reflexive, button pressing response truly reflective of our potential as human beings? Well, actually, it's not. As human beings, we are capable of much, much more. And this goes back to our higher and lower natures, and which aspect of ourselves we are cultivating more. Because we all contain an inner beauty and an inner beast, and depending on which one we feed more, which one we cultivate more, that is the quality or the aspect of ourselves that is going to be our default settings when in certain circumstances. So we may be stuck with a certain situation. There may be no going around it. It's happening around us or to us, and we're just in a particular circumstance or situation. And we will always have the choice to take the high road or the low road. That is, to choose our inner beauty or our inner beast. And so the more we choose a certain aspect of ourselves, the beauty or the beast, then that will become our default settings. So this is a natural phenomena, because athletes, for example, they train for years for an event or a race that is over in minutes. And we're no different. Even though we may not be a professional accomplished athlete in that sense, but we're all human beings and we have the potential for cultivation of higher levels of consciousness. So this training that is very important to a positive outcome for an athlete is similar for us, but our training is the training of the mind. Because when we train the mind, we're able to better access those noble qualities of ourselves. And, you know, because our noble qualities aren't necessarily our default settings. Now, we have to understand that these higher qualities or the beauty within is actually our natural state. However, it's not always our default settings. So, you know, this is something important to understand, because our natural state is the purity and the goodness of the soul that we all are as human beings. We are spirit souls having a human experience. So this natural state of pure goodness is actually not always a default state. However, we can behave or make choices in such a way that it does become the default state. And when it's not the default state, that is because our true spiritual natures are covered over by layers of conditioning of the body, of the human body, which includes the subtle body of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So our job is to strip all these layers of covering off to reveal our true spiritual nature, and thus allowing it to become our default. So many people, in order to achieve this sort of mind training, engage in a spiritual practice, and one such spiritual practice is that of Bhakti Yoga. Now, part of Bhakti Yoga is the principle of ahimsa, or cruelty-free. And this is reflected in our lifestyle, our vegetarian lifestyle, whereby we avoid harm to animals at all costs. But is this ahimsa principle limited to animals, or is kindness to animals or compassion to animals the limits of our compassion? Well, actually, we can go way beyond that as human beings. However, there is one particular animal that is the most important for us as spiritual practitioners to be compassionate to, and that is that of a particular kind of bird. Now, this bird is actually, as a metaphor, our own spirit soul. Now, this bird is housed in the body, in our material bodies. And this is actually in the same metaphor expressed as the cage that the bird lives in. So this bird in the cage is actually crying to be free, because the body is actually very restrictive, and as I said, has many coverings to the true essence of the spirit soul, which is really only wanting to express itself in the best way possible. So the ancient sages of the Bhakti Yoga tradition knew the importance of feeding this bird, and they knew how to feed this bird, and they've shared their knowledge with us through the philosophy and principles and practice and teachings of Bhakti Yoga. So they knew that at our essence we are beings of great love, but that love nature is covered over, as I mentioned before. So what happens is, in effect, our bird in the cage is starving, because we're so busy with the bodily concept of life and polishing that cage to a high shine that we forget about our little bird. We forget, and we may be thinking that we're compassionate to other living beings. However, if we're not compassionate to our own little bird, then we don't really have much scope to cultivate that true compassion that we all have. Now, these same sages, as physicians of the soul, prescribed the perfect diet for this little starving bird. And they've shared it with us through the philosophy and teachings of Bhakti Yoga. Now, a fun and fabulous fact is that every living being thrives on love. Now, chanting the Maha Mantra is a part of the Bhakti Yoga tradition, and the Maha Mantra is actually an expression of love through sound. Now, as we usually do in these videos, we'll chant the Maha Mantra together now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, when we chant this Maha Mantra, what happens is the portals to our own individual unique expressions of love and compassion are opened wide. And because the reason is that we're connected to the source of all compassion, to Krishna and his divine feminine counterpart. So when we can be compassionate to our own bird through, for example, the chanting of the Maha Mantra on a regular basis, then our compassion naturally starts to flow over to everybody else's bird. And that is where your new heart meets the new world. Now, if you'd like to know more about Bhakti Yoga or the Maha Mantra, please visit my website at newheart-newworld.com. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe if this video was good for you. And I invite your comments because I would love to hear from you. Now, I'll be back with much more from the treasures of Bhakti Yoga. And until then, I wish you all well. Bye for now.